Alberta Oil Sands Alliance sets late 2027 target for Pathways carbon capture investment decision. This is Environmental Intelligence, Episode 65. The Pathways Alliance announced a late 2027 investment decision target for carbon capture in Alberta's oil sands. Record grizzly bear mortalities were recorded in Alberta in 2024, with 40 bears killed by people and 21 of those by law enforcement. Pipeline routing challenges continue in British Columbia's Fraser Valley, where Trans Mountain's prior steep and narrow sections already cost billions. If you only note one thing today for your compliance calendar, Alberta operators now have a fixed late 2027 milestone for Pathways carbon capture under the EPEA and federal industrial emissions frameworks. The Alliance established a specific late 2027 deadline for the investment decision on the carbon capture network. This moves compliance planning forward for operators under Alberta EPEA and federal industrial emissions frameworks. No immediate filing changes are required, but project schedules must now reference this date. Operators can use the interval to refine measurement, reporting, and verification protocols ahead of the decision. Alberta government data show 40 grizzlies killed by people in 2024, with 21 by law enforcement. This directly informs SARA habitat protection orders and project screening in Grizzly Range. Consultants should update species at risk assessments for any Alberta sites in affected zones. The fact that more than half the deaths came from law enforcement actions marks a departure from prior years. No qualifying peer-reviewed or technical reports with direct Canadian regulatory implications appeared today. Trans Mountain's steep, narrow routing experience is informing Alberta's approach to a new West Coast pipeline, yet the current plan contains gaps in terrain risk assessment. Environmental consultants evaluating pipeline corridors in British Columbia must account for these unresolved geotechnical and regulatory constraints. Project timelines and mitigation budgets will likely increase. The earlier routing difficulties already added billions to Trans Mountain costs, highlighting the need for more rigorous pre-construction terrain analysis. Alberta's proposed avoidance measures remain incomplete on key slope stability and watercourse crossing details. A client with an active oil sands facility under EPEA asks whether the Pathways late 2027 investment decision alters the emissions reduction schedule already embedded in their current approval. The science here is that carbon capture deployment affects both direct stack emissions and the site-specific risk assessments used to set permit conditions. Earlier models assumed capture would be operational by 2030, but the new target compresses engineering and permitting windows. In practice, the experienced reviewer notices that output-based pricing benchmarks can shift once the investment decision is locked, even before physical construction begins. Field data from similar projects show that pre-decision modeling often underestimates the time required for federal-provincial harmonization on measurement, reporting, and verification protocols. Renewal applications must therefore demonstrate how the facility will meet interim intensity targets if capture infrastructure is delayed past the 2027 decision point. The late 2027 milestone also influences assumptions in the site's closure plan, particularly for long-term liability calculations tied to residual emissions. Alberta Environment and Parks reviewers have begun requesting sensitivity analyses that test both a 2028 operational start and a 2032 start within the same submission package. The mistake I see most often is treating the investment decision date as a distant planning item rather than a trigger for immediate updates to the site's annual compliance report and closure plan assumptions. The fix is straightforward. Insert the late 2027 milestone into the next EPEA renewal submission and rerun the emissions forecast using the current output-based allocation factors. If you're working on oil sands projects in Alberta, review EPEA approvals against the late 2027 Pathways timeline. Update species at risk screening protocols to reflect 2024 grizzly mortality data in Alberta. Monitor British Columbia pipeline routing assessments for new geotechnical or environmental constraints. Brief clients on how the carbon capture decision date affects current emissions reduction commitments. Track Alberta oil sands carbon capture investment decision progress toward late 2027. Review grizzly bear mortality reports for implications on ongoing SARA assessments in Alberta. Assess Fraser Valley Pipeline environmental challenges for British Columbia project applications. Monitor federal-provincial coordination on industrial emissions rules tied to the Pathways timeline. In the next briefing, watch for updates on federal-provincial coordination affecting output-based pricing benchmarks. That's environmental intelligence for today. If this briefing is useful to your practice, share it with a colleague and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back with the next briefing. Have a productive day. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. SpaceX Daily, the daily companion for following SpaceX as a public company, from Starship to the stock ticker. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. Following the long arcs, story trackers on naranetwork.com follow major programs across episodes: Tesla, SpaceX, AI, space science, and more. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.